if you want to basically guarantee that you will never be fluent in a new language, there is like this one foolproof method. You start by memorizing the grammar rules.
Yeah, which sounds completely backward to how we're raised, right?
Right. But today we are looking at this massive stack of pedagogical research that proves traditional schooling, like, the standard textbook stuff, actually paralyzes our ability to communicate.
It really does. I mean, when you look at how human beings actually acquire language biologically, you realize that the traditional classroom model with the desks and rows and chalkboards just covered in verb conjugations, it's a complete inversion of how the brain actually wants to process information.
Yeah, totally. So welcome to the deep dive. We're taking a really close look today into the fascinating mechanics of how we actually master a language in the digital age. And I want to tell you right now, whether you are actively learning a new language, or maybe you're trying to master a complex new professional skill, or, you are just insanely curious about how your brain acquires and stores knowledge, this deep dive is going to completely flip your assumptions.
Oh, absolutely. Prepare to have your mind change.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
To understand where learning goes wrong, we have to look at the very beginning of the journey. Stage 1. The sources lay out this strict, non-negotiable hierarchy for language acquisition, going from absolute beginner all the way up to expert.
Right. And the guiding principle of this entire framework dictates that the priority order, and this is super important, must always be comprehension, followed by production, then accuracy, then fluency, and finally nuance.
Wow.
Yeah. And the text emphasizes an absolute rule here. Never reverse that order.
Never reverse it.
Never. Most traditional programs fail because they try to teach accuracy before production. They are teaching about the language instead of actually how to use it.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
Because if I am an absolute beginner in a new language,
yeah,
right, and I'm about to travel to a new country, shouldn't I be obsessing over the grammar rules?
You'd think so, but no.
Because, I want to make sure I don't sound completely foolish when I open my mouth. Do I need to know the rules of the game before I start playing?
I get that, I really do. But that is the exact trap that causes cognitive overload. Memorizing grammar rules before learning to speak is, it's like trying to memorize the aerodynamic physics of a baseball before someone throws one at your head. Oh, wow. That's a great way to put it.
Right. You don't need the physics. You just need the reflex to put your glove up. Starting with grammar actually slows learners down because it forces the brain to run a massive computational equation every single time they just want to say hello.
Yeah, because I'm standing there thinking, okay, is this noun masculine or feminine? What tense is this verb supposed to be? Does the adjective go before or after?
Exactly. And by the time you've done the math, the person you're talking to has already walked away. You are just completely paralyzed.
It's like my brain is a dial-up modem.
Pretty much. So in the absolute beginner stage, the focus shouldn't be on spelling rules or conjugations at all. It should be entirely on sounds, listening, and just basic sentence building. Grammar is merely a tool to solve immediate communication problems. It is not a subject to be worshipped.
So it's really about survival communication first.
Yes, precisely. You only deploy the grammar required to get your exact point across in that specific moment. Okay, that makes so much sense when you look at the practical examples from the PhraseLab Learning scripts we have. They have this entire lesson designed for beginners on how to introduce themselves, and they completely bypass that stiff academic, hello, my name is blank.
Oh,
structure.
They use something much better.
Right. They use this psychological trick called the name, role, hook method.
It's such a fantastic example of prioritizing function over rigid structure.
So in their script, the character Betty introduces herself by saying, she says, "Hi, I'm Betty. I'm a teacher, and I'm obsessed with vintage mystery novels."
Yeah.
It's just so immediate. And grammatically, it's incredibly simple. It's basically just, I am repeated 3 times.
But look at what that simplicity accomplishes neurolinguistically.
Okay, what does it do?
It prioritizes an engaging human connection over flawless mechanics. By ending with a hook like vintage mystery novels, Betty gives the listener something to immediately talk about. The goal in these early stages isn't to pass a written exam, it's to survive a social interaction.
Which is way more important in real life.
Exactly. A smile and an interesting hook will get you so much further in a real-world conversation than perfectly conjugating a verb while staring blankly at a stranger.
That is so true. But once a learner stops obsessing over grammar, right, and they start getting their basic point across, a new problem emerges.
Yeah.
Because as you move into the intermediate stages, like stages 3 and 4, the stakes start to feel a lot higher.
They definitely do. The training wheels come off.
The conversations get longer, they get faster. So how does a learner keep moving forward without getting completely exhausted by the mental gymnastics of translating every single word in their head?
That is the defining hurdle of the intermediate stages.
Yeah.
And the framework introduces a really fascinating rule to get past it. And it will probably shock a lot of perfectionists out there.
Hit me with it.
Do not overcorrect mistakes.
Wait, really?
Really, at this level, fluency absolutely matters more than accuracy.
Okay, but if we don't correct the mistakes, won't the learner just permanently learn the wrong thing? Won't they build bad habits?
Not necessarily. And it's because of how the brain builds momentum. If a teacher or even like the learner themselves stops to correct every single dropped article or wrong tense, the learner never actually develops the rhythm of the language. They remain stuck in that computational math equation mindset.
Ah, I see. It's like learning to ride a bike.
Yes.
If you stop the bike and get off every single time your posture is slightly off or, your foot slips on the pedal, you'll never get the forward momentum required to actually balance. The wobbling isn't a mistake. The wobbling is the exact mechanism that teaches your brain how to ride.
That is precisely it. I love that analogy. The wobbling is completely essential. And to build on that, the PhraseLab creators have this brilliant mantra they teach learners in this stage. They say, mistakes are just data.
Mistakes are just data. That's really freeing.
It completely removes the shame from the learning process, right?
Yeah.
It reframes an error. It's no longer a personal moral failure or an embarrassment. It's simply a diagnostic data point about what you need to adjust for next time.
And gathering that data is what pushes a learner into true independent communication. We actually have this amazing transcript from the Speak English with Class YouTube channel that shows exactly what this looks like in the wild.
Oh, the food debate.
Yes. It's a conversation between their two hosts, Jake and Anna, and the topic is food. And looking at this, you realize that moving past the translation phase requires a totally different cognitive strategy.
Because to really progress, you have to stop using your native language as a middleman. You have to start thinking directly in the target language. And food is, biologically speaking, the ultimate vehicle for this.
Why food specifically? Like, why not sports or weather?
Because food bypasses logic and goes straight to the senses. The pedagogical concept happening here is called semantic mapping.
Semantic mapping.
Right. Instead of teaching a vocabulary word by just, handing out a dictionary definition, you map the new word directly onto a learner's existing sensory and emotional memories.
Which is exactly what Jake and Anna are doing in this script. Like, Jake is talking about pizza, but he doesn't just say pizza is a flatbread with tomato sauce. He describes pizza as emotional support with cheese.
I love that line.
Right. He says it's dependable, it doesn't ask too many questions, it just appears and improves your mood.
And then Anna counters with mac and cheese. She describes the golden crispy layer on top, how the aroma completely fills the kitchen, and how suddenly everyone in the house just happens to be wandering nearby, pretending they aren't looking for food.
Yeah, she anchors the vocabulary to the memory of home and quiet evenings.
Actually.
And Jake confesses that if there is garlic bread in the oven, he suddenly becomes this very kind, generous person offering to set the table just so he can stand closer to the kitchen. It's hilarious. But I see what you mean about the underlying mechanics now.
Yeah, it's very intentional.
You aren't translating the word aroma from your native language to English. Your brain is literally remembering the smell of garlic bread, and it reaches directly for the English word.
Exactly. Semantic mapping gives the English word its own direct line to your nervous system. In the source, Jake talks about how when he is tired, he doesn't want fancy restaurant food with a tiny decoration leaf. He wants warm soup or pasta that he can eat in comfortable clothes.
Right, comfort food.
Yes. That concept, comfortable clothes for emotional eating, is universal. When a learner engages with that, the cognitive friction just vanishes. They aren't translating anymore. They are experiencing the language.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because getting your point across and connecting emotionally, that's one thing. But moving from that intermediate stage to actually sounding natural, sophisticated, and culturally fluent, that requires a massive leap.
That's a huge jump.
Yeah, and this brings us to the upper, intermediate, and advanced levels of the framework, stages 5 and 6, where language stops being just a tool and basically becomes a social art form.
Yes. This is the realm of what linguists call pragmatics.
Pragmatics. Okay, explain that for us.
So, if grammar is the technical rulebook of a language, pragmatics is the invisible social rulebook. It's the context that tells you whether a specific phrase is polite, sarcastic, formal, or even offensive, entirely depending on who you are talking to and where you are.
Okay, the sources outline this say it better concept that perfectly illustrates this exact difference between technical vocabulary and pragmatic nuance.
Oh, this is a great example.
Let's look at the Speak English with Class lesson again. They say, imagine you are at a dinner party, someone cooked for you, and you just do not like the meal. Technically, a learner has the vocabulary to say, this food has no taste.
Which is grammatically flawless. Subject, verb, object, perfect.
Right. But wait, objectively, chemically, the phrases, this food has no taste and this food is bland mean the exact same thing. Why does the human brain process those two sentences so completely differently in a social setting?
Because of the social weight and the direction of the blame. If you say, this food has no taste, pragmatically, you are attacking the chef. Yeah. You are stating it as an objective, undeniable fact that they failed at cooking. As the hosts joke in the script, saying that could literally start a family argument. It is culturally dangerous to say that.
So how does the curriculum teach them to navigate that kind of minefield?
They teach the learner to say, it's a little bland for me.
It's a little bland for me.
Yeah.
Adding the for me completely changes the dynamic.
Completely. It shifts the blame from the cook's ability to your own personal palate. It softens the blow. That shows advanced tone control. Stage 6 mastery isn't about having the largest vocabulary in the room. It's about understanding the collateral damage your words can cause and skillfully navigating around it.
Which brings up a really fascinating point about idioms. Because when you talk to language learners, they are obsessed with idioms.
Oh, they love them.
They really want to say things like, it's raining cats and dogs, or bite the bullet, because they think it makes them sound like a native speaker.
And unfortunately, a lot of traditional programs cater to that by just handing out huge lists of idioms to memorize. But the framework drops a critical, almost harsh rule here. It says, idioms without usage are useless.
Why is it so dangerous to just memorize them from a list?
Because idioms are heavily dependent on pragmatics. If you memorize an idiom without understanding the exact cultural context of when to use it, you will inevitably drop a casual, folksy idiom into the middle of a very formal business negotiation.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And when you do that, you haven't demonstrated mastery. You've demonstrated a complete lack of social awareness. You've basically proven you don't understand the room.
Honestly, having to navigate all these unspoken rules, the tone shifts, the cultural landmines, it sounds incredibly mentally exhausting. It sounds like a recipe for intense anxiety for a learner who is just trying to fit in.
Oh, it triggers a massive amount of anxiety. The cognitive load required to monitor your own speech for social appropriateness is huge. Which brings us to one of the most brilliant behind-the-scenes details from the PhraseLab YouTube automation roadmap.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this.
The digital creators understand this anxiety, so they use psychological anchoring to physically calm the learner's nervous system.
You're talking about the specific character avatars they built, Betty and Nathan.
Yes. They didn't just write good scripts. They used targeted color theory and vocal pacing to manipulate the learner's cognitive load. They designed Betty to represent wisdom, warmth, and real-life experience.
Okay.
Her voice is very empathetic, and she is visually anchored by the color dark purple.
And then on the flip side, you have Nathan, who represents clarity, analytical structure, and the actual mechanics of learning. And his visual anchor is dark cyan. But how does seeing those colors actually help the brain learn?
It acts as a visual cue for the parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay, wow.
Right. When a learner is tackling a really intimidating nuance, like, say, how to politely disagree with a boss without getting fired, the cognitive stress spikes. But the warmth of the dark purple and Betty's empathetic voice signals safety to the brain's amygdala. It literally lowers the defensive barriers and says, you are safe here, mistakes are okay.
That is wild.
And then when the learner needs precise, structured definitions and clear logic, the visual shifts to dark cyan, and Nathan's analytical voice takes over, which naturally engages the prefrontal cortex, the logical part of the brain. The color theory literally helps the learner feel secure enough to take cognitive risks.
It is just mind-blowing. When you're just sitting there watching a simple educational video on your phone, you have no idea that your brain is being actively guided by color theory to reduce your anxiety. It really shows how sophisticated digital learning has become.
It really does. But, even with all these amazing psychological tools reaching the final stage, stage 7, true expert mastery requires a mechanical engine to keep the knowledge from degrading over time.
Right, because you can't just learn it once.
Exactly. The sources don't just tell us what an expert looks like. They reveal the exact maintenance cycle required to stay an expert.
So what does this all mean for the listener? What does that cycle actually look like?
It is a strict, non-negotiable 5-step loop that basically has to happen constantly. Input, guided practice, free practice, feedback, and recycling.
Input, guided practice, free practice, feedback, and it all ends with recycling. Which honestly sounds like a strange term for language. I'm assuming that doesn't mean throwing old vocabulary in a blue bin.
No. Recycling means deliberately forcing older material back into brand new contexts. And the text issues a very stark warning here. If any learning program misses the recycling component, progress won't just stall. It will eventually collapse.
Collapse? Why? Like, what is actually happening in the brain if you don't recycle?
It comes down to a biological process called synaptic pruning.
Okay, pruning, like a tree.
Exactly. The brain is incredibly efficient. If you learn the phrase, "it's a little bland for me," and you practice it once in a controlled setting, get a thumbs up from the teacher, and then never use it again, the brain assumes that neural pathway isn't necessary for survival, so it prunes it, it deletes it to save energy.
Wow, just wipes it out.
Yep. Recycling is the act of spaced repetition. It forces the brain to fire that specific pathway repeatedly in totally different scenarios, which physically thickens the neural connection until the phrase moves from short-term memory into a permanent instinctive reflex.
And you can tie this biological need for repetition directly into your daily life, even if you aren't in a formal classroom setting. Because the PhraseLab creators have a specific script called Finding Focus. And it applies this exact mastery cycle to the reality of trying to learn literally anything in the modern world.
Yeah, that script is so relatable.
You might be listening to this right now on a commute or while answering emails, and that brings us to the final and perhaps most dangerous hurdle of this entire framework, cognitive overload.
Because the biggest threat to that 5-step mastery cycle today isn't a badly written textbook, it's digital distraction.
Exactly. In the script, Betty talks about sitting down to work and feeling like her brain literally has 50 tabs open at once.
We've all been there.
Yes. Nathan labels this information overload. To truly achieve this cycle of mastery, to actually give your brain the biological time and space it needs to recycle knowledge and build those neural pathways, you have to learn how to actively manage your environment.
You have to protect your cognitive bandwidth. It's essential.
The script highlights 3 key actions you have to embody to do this. First, you have to learn how to tune out the noise. You have to physically separate yourself from the digital chaos. Second, you need to get in the zone, which is that psychological flow state where you kind of lose track of time because you are so fiercely focused on the task.
And third, you have to do a deep dive. You have to commit to spending a long, uninterrupted block of time focusing on one specific subject to really understand its mechanisms.
Just like we're doing right now. If you don't aggressively tune out the noise and get in the zone, you can never deeply practice. You can't absorb the feedback you're given, and you certainly won't retain the knowledge long enough to recycle it.
The digital age is honestly a double-edged sword. It gives us access to infinite, brilliantly designed information, like the semantic mapping and psychological anchoring we talked about, but it actively robs us of the sustained focus required to actually master any of it. You have to fiercely protect your focus if you ever want to reach stage 7 in any skill.
It is so true. Man, we have covered incredible ground today. We started by dismantling the myth that you have to memorize the rules of the game before you can play. We learned that grammar is just a tool and that true mastery starts with simply trying to connect.
And then we explored the messy middle, where we learned that wobbling on the bike is biologically necessary. Mistakes aren't failures. They are just data points. And we saw how tying language directly to our senses, like the amazing aroma of garlic bread, bypasses translation entirely.
And ultimately, we uncovered that reaching the highest levels of mastery isn't about having a giant dictionary in your head. It's about navigating the invaluable social rulebook. It's about pragmatics, tone, and knowing exactly how your words impact the people around you.
And none of it sticks unless you ruthlessly protect your focus and constantly recycle what you've learned.
Absolutely. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering question to ponder on your own. We talked extensively about how advanced fluency requires mastering a culture's pragmatics. So if reaching the absolute highest level of language mastery requires you to perfectly adapt to a new culture's humor, their irony, and all of their unspoken social rules. All their unspoken rules. At what point does learning a new language fundamentally alter your original personality?
Wow, that is a deeply fascinating thing to think about.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep protecting your focus, keep learning, and we invite you to tune in with us next time.